Today I am talking about writing nonfiction books. I've written a few, and I'll kind of talk about them, but I'll also kind of talk about what gets me excited to write a nonfiction book. So, first off, I'm a huge fan of reading nonfiction books. Love it. I love history. I love autobiographies. I love biographies. I read a lot of band, but even stuff like I'm not really a Grateful Dead fan. I'm not really a Doors fan, but I'm going to read those biographies or those autobiographies. Definitely not a Beatles fan, but I've probably read five books about the Beatles because I want the history of it. I want I'm especially excited about the beginnings, the origins of people's lives. So obviously, I read a lot of books about bands that I do like, and so a lot of heavy metal biographies, autobiographies, stuff like that. So as a fan reading it and not really being a huge fan growing up in my teen years into my 20s, I really didn't read a lot of history books. Glass are a little dirty. And it's kind of like, the next 30 years is playing catch up. So I read a lot, and then I was at one point years and years ago, many years ago. Like, let me tell you. Hopefully, there's a date on this thing. 2007, October 2007, which means probably in 2006, my first nonfiction book was started. And, at that point, 2006, 2007, I don't have a lot of releases out. I have a handful of short stories. I'm 4 or 5 years away from being a full-time author. I'm working a dead-end job. I'm just not happy. I'm married. I got two young kids at that point. My son must have been about maybe 9 years old at this point. He's pushing 30 now, and he was totally into pro wrestling. So was I as a kid at his age. So it was like a bonding thing for Jay and I. We would watch a ton of wrestling together. Okay, now I grew up old school in the 80s. So I grew up on Georgia Championship Wrestling, World Class Championship Wrestling from Texas. I mean, I grew up in New Jersey, so there was shows all the time. AWA, NWA, there was Polynesian wrestling we could find like on a midnight on a Saturday night. There's all kinds of really, really cool wrestling shows to watch. The WWF, me and my brother watched them. We weren't huge fans, and we had Madison Square Garden Network, so we would see the cards supposedly live, but not. My dad took us to wrestling shows. My dad got a kick out of it, and we read every wrestling magazine and collected every wrestling magazine there was. Me and my brother, and I would be like, "Oh, this guy! Oh, that's the Dingo Warrior from World Class Championship Wrestling," and then later on he's repackaged as the Ultimate Warrior, stuff like that. But we knew their real names. We knew all about them. From reading the all the sheets and all the magazines and stuff, and so it was a lot of fun for us. So my son is 9 years old, whatever it was, and he's like, "Why don't we go and see a wrestling match? Why don't we go? I've never been, obviously." And I was like, "You know what? I've been to at your age. I went to like one every couple of months. So let me look." And at first, at that point we lived in Ormond Beach near Daytona Beach, Florida. And I looked it up, and there was a independent wrestling show happening that night. And I was like, "Well, let's go see if we can find this place." Got the address. Could not find it. Could not find where this show was. So then I was annoyed, and then he was disappointed, and so I was like, "Well, let me look. Let me see if there's something else." And I found one in Orlando, which is about an hour, hour and a half, 7 hours, depending on traffic, for the next night. That was a Friday night. Saturday night, they were having a thing. I said, let's go. Let's just go and let's see this thing. And we went, and I saw a bunch of indie wrestlers. I had no idea who any of these guys were. They put on a great show. My son absolutely loved it. And leaving that night, as we're walking away, I'm thinking, this would make a great book, a nonfiction book about this little wrestling federation that's been around for it was coming up on 10 years that they had been around. And I was like, you know what? Let me figure out who I can contact here and just have a conversation with him, which I did, which was Chris Carson was running it. It was Southern Championship Wrestling, SCW. And we hit it off. We went out, we hung out, had dinner, had a couple of drinks. He talked about the beginnings and everything else. And I said, I want to write a book. And so he gave me full access to all of the wrestlers that wrestled for him. They did a monthly show in different places in Orlando, in Altamont Springs, all over Central Florida, basically. And I got to hang out with them for several months and interview authors, and it was so much fun. So back then, it wasn't like, hey, Amazon, you just put a file up on Amazon. I found a woman who was interested in printing. Basically, she was a housewife, and she was like, I want to do this. I don't even remember how I even met her. But anyway, she ended up renting all of this printing equipment, just giant things, and put it in her garage. And she was printing my books at that point. So I would say, and she was like, you gotta order 4, groups of 4. So I'd be like, all right, I need 100, I need 200, whatever. And the book was SCW Florida Wrestling, Blood, Sweat, and Gold, The Many Faces and Heels of Southern Championship Wrestling. So there's a copy of the book. I think I have 2 copies left. Okay. And you can find this. Somebody told me they bought a copy for like $100 off of eBay. I'm like, that is insane. That is insane. I guess if you like it. So it's nonfiction. So it's the a lot of wording on the back. So we put this book together. There are a lot of pictures and old cards from them. And it was a lot of fun to do this. And she did a great job. And yeah, so, and I would take there's their title histories. I got in here. I got all of it, right? And none of these guys made it. Okay, only one actually made it to the WWF or WWE at the time, and that was this guy. If you're a wrestling fan, he was Michael Cade. That's his name. He actually lived in Jacksonville, Florida. He was on the morning news at the time, and he was one of their wrestlers. And he ended up getting a contract with WWF, and I think he's still there. As a matter of fact, he's like an announcer for their NXT thing or something like that. He was Byron Sexton, is what they repackaged him as. Brian Kelly is his real name. Michael Cade. So that was really kind of neat that I got to do this book. Went to a ton of shows after that. Brought 100, 200 copies with me, and they let me sell the book. And all the fans came out, and a lot of them bought the book. I gave copies to all of the wrestlers that were in the book. A couple guys I never got to, and they were really arrogant and egotistical and pissed off at me, and that's on them. But anyway, that was my first book, doing nonfiction and doing a ton of research on these guys and having a lot of fun. And my son, my 2 daughters, and the girl I was dating at the time, her son, also a big wrestling fan. So we would go to all the shows, and we were like, I was like royalty. It was great. Everybody talked to me. I'm sure there are people that did not like me. I don't care. Anyway, so that was the first foray. That's a good word. foray into doing nonfiction books. And I was like, you know what? It was a lot of work. I don't think I'm ever going to do that again. That's 2007. So then I wrote a bunch of books, tons of books, 100 books at that point. And my wife, girlfriend at the time, it's 2016, maybe into 2017. And through one of her vendors that she works with, my wife is a commercial property manager. So there's all kinds of vendors she has to work with. And they gave us tickets to a Jacksonville Suns baseball game. It's a AA for the Marlins. She didn't like baseball. She was like, yeah, I'm not a fan of baseball. And so we went to the game. And I was paying attention to the game. She's talking to everybody. I'm paying attention to the game. And at one point, she was like, what just happened on the field? And I explained whatever it was. And so I started teaching her, and we started going to more games. And then the next season, 2016 maybe, we bought season tickets. Half season, like the second part of the season. And we went to the games. We loved them. And we got to know some of the other season ticket holders. So the following year, the couple that was doing their booster club. So a booster club, most minor league teams, back in the day at least, they had a booster club. So the players, I mean, they were making garbage money. And so a lot of times you would let players live in your house. You would feed them. You would help them out. And the booster club would do picnics on a Sunday after an afternoon game before they got on a bus for road games. And so we really just helped them out. And we got involved, and we started having at one point, we had players here that were living with us. 3 players at a time were staying with us. I became the president of the booster club. And me and my wife loved it because we got the inside on all the players. The guys that stayed with us were really cool. They were basically the age of our kids at that point. So it was a lot of fun to help these kids out that had no money. I mean, they basically were minor leaguers. And so in the beginning of the season, I was like, you know what? Beginning of the 2017 season, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to write a book. I'm just going to write a book about the season. I'm going to write a book about game by game. I'm going to kind of keep track. I'm going to take notes. Every night after we go home, I'll take notes. I listen to them, the away games on the radio. And I got in contact with management, and I said, listen, I'm interested in doing this book. And they were 100% behind it, total access. You can come into the offices anytime. You can interview anybody you want. We'll set up so during batting practice before a game, if you want to come up and interview 3-4 players, that kind of thing. And it was great. And so that became a view from my seat, my baseball season with the Jumbo Shrimp. Because by the time I was like, yeah, I'm in, I want to do a book about the Jacksonville Suns, they rebranded to the Jumbo Shrimp, which is an awesome move for them. They're selling out. They're doing great. And they're now AAA. They're now the Marlins AAA team. So once they became AAA, we stopped going so much because the players were all given more money. They were all giving a living expense. They were given rent money and stuff. And they were basically told, don't live with anybody. You got to go to this. You got to rent a place. So we stopped having players here, which was really, it sucked for us. And so before that, I wrote this book, but not only did I write this book about game by game for the entire season, I also put a lot of stories about growing up in a household where we all watched baseball. I grew up a Boston Red Sox fan. 5 years old, became a Red Sox fan. My mother and my brother, New York Yankees fans. I grew up in New Jersey, so my dad, a Detroit Tigers fan. So how did they become fans of those teams? Well, it's in the book. I interviewed my mother and my father. They talked about stuff. They talked about my grandfather. He worked for Ballantyne's Beer, and he was the liaison between the New York Yankees and the beer. Back in the 50s and 60s, a lot of the advertisements were Ballantyne's Beer on the walls. So my dad got to go to a ton of games when he was a kid for free. He hated the Yankees. My uncle Armand, loved the Yankees. So we kind of, I talk about that. I talk about some of the special games. Me and my brother were at the Pine Tar game. If you know anything about baseball, George Brett, Pine Tar game, we were at that game, 13 years old. Me and my dad went in 93 to, I got tickets to the World Series and Phillies versus Blue Jays, and it was like that 15-14 game or whatever. It was the highest scoring World Series game up to that point. So some of the different things we got to see, my dad woke us up at like 2:00 in the morning. It was like, come on, we're going to Detroit. Mark the Bird Fidget is coming back off the disabled list, pitching for the Tigers. And we just jumped in the car and we drove to Detroit to go see a game that night, and then turn around and drive all the way back. So a lot of fun stories besides just player interviews and different things. I'm not sure. I know some of the players that I interviewed here and we met, they did go on to major league careers. Some of them are still playing. Some of the guys that were part of the Jacksonville Jumbo Shrimp are still playing. A couple of guys that live with us, Kyle Keller and Jeff Kinley, they're both still pitchers. Jeff is in Mexico, became a starting pitcher and doing quite well the last few years. And Kyle Keller is in Japan, and he's been doing great for the last few years. So a lot of players, a lot of back and forth. They still like to send my wife a happy birthday on her birthday, and we still keep in touch with several players, which is really neat. One of the guys, Alex Vija, was two-time World Series champion with the Dodgers, and we knew him way back when. So that was really fun. So this book is a lot of fun. That's me eating a hot dog because, I mean, you're at a ball game. This was a lot of fun. That was actually our row. That was actually the row where I basically sat right there. So that was the picture I took. So, and I got to do a signing at the ballpark during a game and sold a ton of books. It was a line of people buying this book, which was amazing. So that was my second foray, I can use that word again, into doing nonfiction. And again, it was like, I'm not gonna push it. I'm not gonna do anything until I'm like, I get a great idea and I'm passionate about it and I want to do it. You know, that's the way you write. You get a passionate idea and you write about it because you're passionate about it. And so for me, that came out in 2018. And then 2019, I drink a lot of coffee. I do a coffee of the day short every day. Please watch those. They're fun. I tell you what the weather is in Jacksonville. Tell you what I'm going to be up to for that day. Whatever. It's a 75-second thing. There's no reason for you not to watch it. There's also no reason for you not to hit the subscribe button. But we'll get into that. I drink a lot of coffee. My favorite coffee is Dunkin Donuts. I grew up on it. I grew up in New Jersey. You know, we're not Massachusetts where there's one on every corner. Back then there was one on every like fourth corner. Although now it's like one on every other corner anytime we go back to New Jersey. And I got this idea and I said to my wife, how about this for an idea? Why don't I do an entire month, every day, one or more times, I go to a different Dunkin' Donuts and I buy a different item that I've never had before in the course of this month. And I do like a little review of that. And maybe I talk to somebody. Maybe I talk to a customer or I talk to somebody behind the counter, you know, and she was like, are you going to be able to do that? And I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, you're not really a people person. I'm like, I'm really not. I'm like, I can pull this off. I can do this. I have confidence in myself. Man, that was a pulling teeth for me. That was a lot. That was a struggle. I end up so I did it in October of 2019, from the 1st to the 31st. So there's a lot of pumpkin spice and stuff like that. It was really hard to talk to people, for me, to just a random stranger or somebody who's busy working. So the book came out in 2021, and it's called A Month of Dunkin, One Man's Journey for Coffee, Donuts, Sandwiches, and Stories. There's a cover. Jack Wallen cover on that one, by the way. And yeah, so that's basically the premise of this. Is I had a different Dunkin' item every day, and I list, at the back of the book, I list all the different items I had. And it's a different Dunkin' Donuts every time. So I could not go back to a Dunkin' Donuts. Now, during this month, we had a couple of book signings. So we drove up to a horror convention in Dalton, Georgia. We drove up to the Merrimack Valley huge book signing they have every year, still going on. We drove up to that. We stopped in New Jersey. We did a book signing at a Barnes and Noble there. And so in the meantime, we're hitting places all the way from Florida all the way up to Massachusetts. So when I started the book, I sent a message to Dunkin' headquarters, and I said, "Hey, I want to write this book, and it will be positive. I'm not going to do anything crazy. Would you be interested? Would you let me do it?" And they said yes. They send us a copy, and so when it's send us a copy when it's written, and then I did, and then they were like, "Send us a copy when it's printed," which I did. Now the goal really was for them to go, "Hey, we'll print this. We'll do something. We'll put this in 1,000 of our stores," or something like that. It did get into a lot of their stores though, which is pretty neat. And the book it did very well. And that was a lot of fun. And there was a lot of stuff that I ate or drank that I wouldn't have normally ordered. I'm an old man. I'm like, I'm just going to order the same crap over and over. The good part was this was before COVID. So this is the October, March, the next year we shut everything down. So I was glad to have this written. I had sent it to a publisher who seemed like they would take books like this, and they seemed interested. We had a lot of back and forth. They didn't want anything changed. They loved the book itself. And then COVID hit, and then I heard nothing from them for like all the way through the end of the year. And basically I sent a message. I'm like, I guess I'm gonna pull the book then, unless you're interested. They never got back to me. And so I released it. When did I release this? October 2021. So 2 years after I actually did all the stuff. And so it's a day by day, Wednesday, October 23rd. I'm at 1310 Palm Coast Parkway, Palm Coast, Florida at 11 a.m. And my order that day was a large hot black coffee. That's what I drank. So now I interviewed people, I talked to people, and I would explain what I was doing. A lot of people were like, "Nah, I'm not interested in that." There was a couple people that sat down with me and had conversations. There's a lot of observations of people that happen to be there. I invited people, like when I was in Dalton, Georgia. The late, great Jay Wilburn was also at that convention, and the two of us took a ride one afternoon during it, and we went to the Dunkin', and I interviewed him about his ghostwriting projects and stuff. Author Michael Wiley, great noir thriller author from Jacksonville. That was the first time I met him. I interviewed him at a Dunkin', which no longer exists. Dunkin', which they tore down. And so it was a lot of that. There was a guy who did photography. I interviewed a lot of different people. Some people that I know that I was like, "Hey, I'm going to be at this Dunkin' on this day if you want to come hang out." And it was a lot of fun. It was just a lot of fun to just write that book. And again, it's also a lot of work. I would bring my laptop with me, and I would write as I was going along. Okay. So sometimes I'm writing on another book. Sometimes I'm writing fiction while I'm sitting there, but I would basically sit there. The thing with me and my wife when we travel, we normally just hit the drive through and then we're gone. So um, I don't know how many times she pulled to the drive through. I'm like, nah, we got to go inside. I got to spend at least 15 minutes inside. So we would go inside, we would talk. Some of those conversations are in here too. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun for me because I didn't realize that it was going to be so hard for me to just start talking to people, to just say, hey, I overheard I'm eavesdropping, whatever, or talk to people that are working. I felt bad. I didn't want to pull some 18-year-old kid and go, hey, I know you're really busy, but I got to ask you some questions like that. So it was a lot of fun. I got a lot of writing done. I got a lot of fiction writing done as well at that time. There were sometimes I hit 2 in a day. I think at one point I hit 3 in a day. There was a lot of once you get down towards the end, you're like, what am I going to order that I haven't already ordered? Luckily, they have a ton of things. So I'll be like, I'm going to give me one of those chocolate glazed donuts, and that'll be my thing. And obviously, I would order coffee at every time, but I wouldn't count the coffee because I've already had that specific coffee. So that was a lot of fun to write this. So that's been a few years. That's been 6-7 years since I did that. And will I write another nonfiction book? I get that a lot. I was at AuthorCon 2-3 years ago, and a bunch of people had read the Dunkin book, which I thought was awesome. They're coming up. We were talking about it. What a great concept, blah, blah, blah. And people are like, are you going to do Starbucks? And I'm like, I'm not a big fan of Starbucks. No, I'm not going to do another coffee chain. I'm not going to be like a month of McDonald's. I'm not, we've had that documentary already. I don't know if I'll ever do another nonfiction book, to be honest with you. Now, there was a press, a Florida-based press, that contacted me about 3 years ago, and they wanted me to write a book about Florida cryptids. And I was like, I'm in. And they offered me X number of dollars, which was very good. And the lady said, okay, I had a Zoom conference with her a couple times, and she was like, all right, give me write up a chapter, like a sample chapter. And also you're going to need, can you find an illustrator? And so Michael O'Connell, who's local, who's done a lot of illustrations, he's done a lot of really cool stuff. He was like, "Yeah, I'll do it for you." And then, you'll get paid once this goes, and you're just going to do these dozen cryptids, skunk ape, and all that. And at the time, I was writing a book called St. John's River Monster for Severed Press, a fiction book, a monster based on the legend of the St. John's River Monster. If you're in Jacksonville, you know what I'm talking about. And so I wrote the nonfiction. I did a ton of research, which really helped me for the fiction book. That did come out. I sent her the thing. I sent her Michael's drawing of the St. John's River Monster, which was excellent. And then crickets for like 2 months. And I'm like, well, we were trying to get this done by the end of the year, whatever year that was, because they wanted an October release. And there's a lot that goes into, especially if you're working with a publisher. It's not like, hey, we're going to put it out in 2 weeks. So I messaged, and then somebody out of nowhere messaged, oh, that person, she doesn't work here anymore. She works for another press now. I'm taking over, and I will read your sample and get back to you. And then nothing for like 3 months. And I sent another message. I'm like, hey, what are we doing? And basically, she's like, yeah, basically, to be honest, I'm only taking on new projects that I picked, more or less. So you're from the old group, and we don't want you, more or less. So I was like, all right. But at least I didn't write the whole book. At least I didn't write this entire book because I didn't want to. It was a lot. That was going to be a ton of research to do that book. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to write that book. I don't want to do nonfiction because I'm writing a lot of fiction right now that I'm making really good money on, and I don't want to lose that momentum. So will I write another nonfiction book? I don't think so. At this point, I don't think so, but you never say never. It could happen. I'm not sure of what I would write about. Something really, I need to be passionate about something that hits me, and I'm like, that's it. There's the idea right there. That's what I'm going to write. So I hope you enjoyed this journey with me about my three books, three nonfiction books that I wrote. These three right here in my hands, and this one I don't know if you're ever going to get a copy, but these two are still available on Amazon. Grab a copy and read it and review it. That would be really nice. I'll put a link to the two that you can actually get in the description. Otherwise, hit the subscribe button and watch some more of my videos. I'm trying to get to that 4,000 hours thing. I'm at 5,100 subscribers, whatever, as you're watching this, and hopefully it will continue to grow. It's been growing exponentially, if that isn't even a real word. And I just appreciate all the follows, all the comments. Love answering questions out there. If there's a nonfiction book that you've read that you're like, that's a really good book, okay, let me know. I want to know about it. I want to know about it because I love reading nonfiction books. All right, everybody. Thank you for hanging out with me. I do appreciate it.